Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Angela Bole, and I'm the CEO at the Independent Book Publishers Association, and really appreciate you joining us today. We have the first in what we are calling our COVID-19 webinar series that will go on through the course of April at the very least. Every Thursday in April at 10 a.m., we'll come together as a community to talk about whatever you want to talk about related to COVID-19 and how it's affecting your businesses. Today, as we kick off the series, we wanted to do something a little bit more formal and provide more of a moderated industry reactions kind of a session. So we are here to do that. Today we have an amazing panel of speakers, which you can likely see, I hope, if you're logged into the webinar. And you can also at this point still see their contact information on the screen. I want to let you know we're going to pull that down in a little bit, but we will also make sure that it gets emailed out to you. We've sent you all their detailed bios. So I'll be saying names and titles, but we won't go into detailed bios in this session. Hopefully you can pull those up on your email and follow along. Almost every one of these panelists has been on the board of directors or will be soon. And we also have our legal advisor, Jonathan Kirsch, with us today. Before we kick off with the panelists, I want to share my screen really quick and make sure that everyone has seen not my email or my screensaver, which is our board of directors. You can tell I'm like IBPA. My screensaver is literally our board. Very, very me. We did create this COVID-19 Resource Center, and it changes all the time. So the last time we updated it was 6 p.m. last night, right before the Senate was going into vote on the Keeping Workers Paid and Employed Act. So obviously this morning that vote has happened. This is already out of date, so we're going to change that. The reason I mention that is to say, keep checking back here. We'll continue to put up news links that are relevant to our community, industry partner notices that are relevant to our community, and also, of course, anything in here on the opportunities for financial assistance. We'll continue to update this as well. Again, all as soon as we know it, we'll update it. This is an important thing. I just wanted to make sure people were aware that we are in a period right now where you can comment on the expanded paid leave, where businesses with under 500 employees will need to pay sick leave for their employees or leave for their employees if they have to care for a sick family member. So check that out. I think it's important for a lot of our membership to know that there is a comment period open until March 29th on this one. And here are your other webinars. Every Thursday, a roundtable discussion. You can log into something just like this again next week if you'd like. Okay, now I will pull the screen back as I promised. And I'll remind everyone on the line that we're using the chat feature if you just logged in so that you can send in all your questions through the chat. And you can start now if you'd like. I'll bank them up. It asked me lots of questions. All right, so we'll go to full screen now. And you can play around with it if you're on the WebEx, by the way. Go ahead and hover over the screen and pull up a tile view if you'd like to see all of us, or you can just see one of us real big if that's your preference. Structure today, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panelists, all of them with different perspectives in the industry, and they've all been watching what's been happening through their vertical very closely. So we're going to give everybody, we said 6 to 10 minutes to just talk about what they've been seeing, how it's been affecting their day-to-day job, and then again, go through some moderated Q&A. So we have Robin Cutler from IngramSpark, and we have Bailey Davis, also from Ingram, but with less of an author-publisher point of view, more of a small press point of view. We have Jonathan Kirsch, who's been IBPA's legal advisor for 25, maybe 30 years. I think.
It's been, I don't like to mention the number anymore.
We just say a very long time.
Sure.
And also copyright, trade, piracy, and general publishing lawyer who works with a lot of our members. Maggie Langrick is here from LifeTree Media, Maggie being a publisher, to talk through a publisher perspective. And Kelly Peterson, Director of Digital Strategy at Independent Publishers Group, give you a sense of what's happening digitally. And then, of course, all of you, right now 90 of you, to talk about what you're seeing, and I'll moderate those. So we'll go through the panelists in a pretty stacked way. and I'll bank the questions, and then we'll open up a Q&A a little bit more toward the end. We've booked an hour and a half, which may seem like a long time, but our rehearsal took 50 minutes, so we'll see. I think we can fill an hour and a half conversation. All right, how's that? I think that's a good setup, and we'll go ahead and kick it off then. We have a bit of an order we set. So first we're going to turn to Robin Cutler. Again, she's the director of IngramSpark, and she's completing her 4th year on the IBPA Board of Directors as well. So thank you, Robin.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? It's great to be with you this morning. It's morning for me. I'm in New Mexico, so it could be afternoon if you're on the East Coast. But I wanted to start off just talking a little bit about Ingram in general. So as many of you may have read in some online posts and in some media reports such as Publishers Weekly, Ingram, as one of the world's largest book wholesalers, is still very much in business, having been deemed an essential business. So we are really, really happy about that, as you can imagine. Apparently, reading is considered essential to human growth, development, and happiness. So we should all applaud and support this as authors and publishers, obviously. The functions that Ingram serves is that of book distribution into the trade, meaning that we supply book content created by authors and publishers to bookstores and libraries, as well as directly to readers. We do this by having stock publisher inventory in our warehouses and through our print-on-demand company, Lightning Source, that is able to manufacture and ship orders in a timely fashion all over the world. And also through our digital services that supply content directly to ebook vendors such as Kindle, Apple, directly to students through our educational platform. So obviously we have a lot going on at Ingram today. So as of today, all of this capability is still working, and we are in business. Ingram, just so you know, is protecting our workforce, many of whom have been working from home for some time. For our distribution and print-on-demand business, our associates' health is our primary concern, and we are taking every precaution to make sure they're safe while they are doing the traditional business of distribution for us. So what does this all mean for an indie author or an author publisher? I think everyone, no matter how well established they are with social media platforms and online engagement with readers, have probably already seen a decline in their usual business as the world's population of readers are adjusting to this new normal that we're all having to adjust to. But for those authors who have already invested for years in their own platforms, into their social media and websites, they are really the best position for what we're facing in the near future. So if you haven't been selling primarily online before, now would be a time to spend the effort to shore that up. Everyone is online now, and I've noticed it already. My internet is starting to slow down a little bit, even in the hitherland of New Mexico where I live, and that's probably what everybody's kind of experiencing. So I think everybody should get busy with a plan to shore up their online presence as an author. Also, you should definitely be making your content available in multiple formats, including print on demand if you haven't done that already, making your content available as ebooks, and lastly as audiobooks. I put audio last just because of the production expense and earning back that investment that it takes. So make sure, before you move to audio, that your print and your ebook sales are there before you move, and that's actually my advice, to make sure of that. I also want to remind you that if you have an IngramSpark or a Lightning Source account, you can have us manufacture and ship your orders to whomever you want by placing those orders directly into your accounts. Those are called drop ship orders for us. We do this all day long, and more people than ever are using our drop ship service just because it's so convenient, and it takes that burden away from you having to pack up orders yourself. Some of you may be seeing some changes through Amazon already. As this giant is shifting to its new normal, many authors are reporting that their availability messaging on their Amazon detail pages are actually changing, and they're changing daily. So what you could count on in the past in terms of Amazon sales are probably shifting just as we're talking here today. I will tell you that we are seeing at Ingram, we are seeing sales shift to other online retailers in a pretty big way, such as Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Target. And these are the .com versions of all of those retailer sites. And Ingram supplies print and POD content to all of those retailers. So just so you know that. Happily, IngramSpark and other author content is already positively represented on these sites. So if you're not seeing in-stock availability on your Amazon detail page, you should be checking these other online retail sites. I would also encourage you to point your fans and readers to another site that you may not have heard of. It's called bookshop.org. It's a site that's owned by the American Bookseller Association. Your books may be represented there. They're still kind of getting up to speed. They may not be, but most books are already represented there. And what's great about that site is it benefits our indie bookstores. So check that out too. So finally, as we are seeing, all of this happen in real time, we're seeing a shift in the actual types of books that many retailers are actually purchasing. I will tell you that juvenile fiction and nonfiction BISAC codes are especially in huge demand, especially juvenile nonfiction. And you can imagine why with all of our kids at home now. So activity books, game books, workbooks, those are in high demand. We're seeing strong sales also in religion and academic education. So if you've never read a book as an author intended for children, now might be a time to actually try your hand at that. And last bit of advice I would say is if you're planning your book launch in the next couple of months, I would probably encourage you to push that out to midsummer or later in the fall. So that's kind of my overview, Angela, and I'm happy to answer anybody's questions here.
Well, you got one. Charles wanted to know after having just launched, he was wondering if you should postpone most of the promotion. So you mentioned you had a piece of advice. Maggie, as the publisher, is going to talk a little bit about that, Charles, as well. So we'll leave that there. I'll jump to Bailey, but there was one follow-up from Carla on Bookshop, and that is, I'm a huge fan of Bookshop, and I hope a lot of people will check it out. But how is it different from IndieBound? Can you describe the difference between Bookshop and IndieBound for the listeners?
I think it's the new IndieBound. It's a new site that I think is going to be replacing IndieBound. It kind of works the same way, but there is some different functionality and better functionality that's incorporated into the Bookshop site.
Yeah. Yep, I think too. I think it will replace as well. There are questions in an overview sense I'm going to get to everybody on. I love Lee Wind, our marketing director's question, where do you see opportunity and where are the optimistic? So we'll kind of follow through on that, but we'll keep the pace going because a lot of your questions are going to be answered by panelists as they speak. So that's Robin Cutler again from Ingram. Robin runs the IngramSpark program, works with a lot of author publishers. Bailey Davis is their content acquisition and sales, works in content acquisition and sales for more of a small press or micro press or publishers with authors kind of a thinking there. So Bailey's going to talk from that perspective and also from a major distributor perspective as well. So Bailey.
All right. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me well?
Sounds great.
Wonderful. So I'm Bailey, for anyone who hasn't met me yet, and Angela's right. So I work with smaller publishers in the small press realm and a few larger publishers who are all seeing various impacts of what the market is dealing with right now. So I wanted to break down what I talked about in two sections. So what we as Ingram are starting to see and what our publishers that we're talking to are starting to see. And Robin did a really great job of talking about how we are starting to see a significant shift to more online ordering. So, you know, as we all know, retailers, physical brick and mortar stores are seeing a significant block right now to business. But fortunately, we've seen an article recently where they're starting to position online retail stores through different tools that are available to them. So they're starting to take those audiences that they have with their community bookstores and try and keep that as much alive through online retail. And one of those tools that they're using is Area, which allows anyone to create a retail site and sell books online. And so they're positioning and they're pivoting as much as necessary to continue to keep that audience engaged with them as a brand. We're also starting to see, especially with larger publishers who rely on inventory in warehouses, concern with the supply chain and availability to be able to ship out of their own inventory to wholesale warehouses so that their books can be available. We're seeing a big shift from physical inventory to virtual inventory to make that available. One program that we're seeing a lot of success with right now for our larger clients is our GAP program. So that allows publishers to maintain kind of a hybrid model. So they can still have their inventory model, but also have the ability to digitally print and drop ship as demand increases and their inventory is held up somewhere. We're also seeing some sales trends similar, you know, Robin touched really well on the children's books, specifically activity books, and we've seen an increase in cookbook sales. Everyone's stuck at home, so they're having to do their own cooking, much to their dismay. So cookbooks are selling pretty well right now. And very much to Robin's point, the juvenile nonfiction, so a lot of parents are responsible now for engaging their children and continuing their education at home. So that content is very important. Another thing that we're seeing from our publishers, small, medium, large, any size, is they are diversifying their formats. So right now, our consumers of content are really relying on being able to have content delivered to them, and part of that is either through dropship for physical inventory or ebooks for digital delivery. So definitely seeing publishers expand their format options right now. And then, you know, that's kind of how we're seeing from the Ingram perspective. And over the past week, I've been doing some calling campaigns with some publishers of various sizes. Right now, a concern that we're seeing is event cancellations. So one thing that independent bookstores have always done so well is supporting their local author community and helping host events. And so because of the current environment right now, those are being canceled. So a lot of publishers are being creative in how to do virtual events. Social media has proven to be a really great tool for that. So live events, Instagram, Facebook. So, you know, publishers who might be, you know, listening in right now and who have had canceled events, definitely continue to engage your audience on social media. Have those live events in the same way that your authors are trying to get connected to your consumers still want to get connected to those brands that they're familiar with and comfortable with. Right now, you know, I think one question we are going to see a lot is in terms of their publishing schedule. So once this is, you know, settled into a new normal, how do we look as, you know, self-publishing authors or publishers or big publishers? What do we look at our publishing schedule? And I think it comes down to, you know, reviewing your content and what you can, what you're willing to invest in your marketing strategy right now. Right now, a lot of stuff on social media is about COVID, and you know, you want to make sure that you're discoverable. So, you know, make sure that if you're going to continue on the path of releasing soon, make sure you invest in the discoverability. So make sure your metadata is out, and that doesn't even just apply to your new content. It's all of your content. So definitely investing in enriching your metadata, and then just make sure that you are keeping engagement with your clients. So a few of the publishers I've been talking to over the past week in my phone campaigns, they really are just engaging with the audience. So, like Robin said, if you already have that platform, use it to continue to build that audience and that business. And so, I really just wanted to give everyone an idea of what we're seeing, not just as Ingram, but also what our other publishers are seeing. So I'm really, looking forward to being able to help provide some guidance today as needed.
Great, thank you. And I think both you and Robin touched a little bit on Mary Claire's question, which are what are the book trends in times like these, thinking about people being in the house. Robin talked about the juvenile nonfiction, and you talked about cookbooks, which is something one of our members, Melanie, wrote in any tips for titles released in March, because they had a cookbook released March 10th.
Yeah.
So you've given some of that, and again, I think, Maggie, you'll talk some more. And let's get through these, and then if there's follow-up questions that come through this, we'll address them, and we'll keep talking. We'll keep talking until 11:30 today, and then we'll talk again next Thursday for another hour and a half, and every Thursday. So there are trends. We are seeing them develop. You guys are seeing them come through your company. And Jonathan Kirsch, again, you've been IBPA legal advisor for 25 or so years. We stopped talking, right? We're not talking about the timeline, but for a very, very long time, 25. And you don't just work with us and a lot of our publishers. You have a robust business working with many publishers from a legal perspective across the industry. So we thought it'd be great, and we really appreciate you talking to us a little bit about what your clients are seeing and thinking about and concerned about.
Thank you, Angela. I'm really pleased to be part of this event, and as a preliminary comment and to put things in the best and most upbeat possible way, what we're doing today is an example of a phenomenon that can be seen throughout the publishing industry and really throughout the United States. There's a huge upwelling of goodwill and innovation and reaching out and support, and I think that's a positive result of this terrible public health emergency that we're confronting. The other thing I'd like to share, again, it's not a legal insight, but the temporary solutions that we're discussing today and that publishers are implementing are an investment in the future. I think we're at a tilting point so that when coronavirus is in the rearview mirror and we're no longer worried about the health threat, I think we will have acquired skills and infrastructure that will serve the publishing industry well going forward. So it's a learning and growing opportunity as well as a public health emergency. The other general comment I need to make, I'm obliged to make, is that as an attorney, I'm giving general comments and information only. What I say in this webinar is not legal advice, and if you need legal advice or financial advice, you should consult a professional advisor. The first and I think most important legal advice I can give is that although it is vital and positive to stay in touch with authors and vendors and customers, as companies all over America have been doing. My inbox is filled with messages of goodwill and practical advice from countless businesses. And that's a good practice. But as a lawyer, I do want to issue a caution. And the caution is that you should avoid saying anything verbally over an internet connection, in a letter, in an email, that manifests your intention not to perform your contractual obligations. Everybody's in a good frame of mind now in terms of working out business arrangements, but not everyone will be in that state of mind on an ongoing basis. And you don't want to put yourself in a position where you have announced to your customers, your vendors, your suppliers, that you're not able to and do not intend to perform your business obligations, and especially not under a contract. The phrase that I wrote down in my notes, and I commend it to you, is it remains our intention to fully perform our obligations. I think that sentence or something substantially like it should be in any communication that goes out where you say, we are not paying you your royalties. We are not publishing your book on the scheduled publication date. We are not holding the author event. It should be in that communication so that you're expressing that you intend to honor your obligations, and that has legal significance down the road. If there's anything that comes up where you are extending, forgiving, suspending an obligation of someone else, or someone else is suspending an obligation of yours, it would be a good practice to confirm that in writing. If someone says, let's say you need to postpone a publication date, you have an author-publisher contract that requires you to publish by a certain date, and you've discussed it with the author, and the author agrees to the extension of time, it would be very prudent to just confirm that in an email. It doesn't have to be a lawyer letter. It can be more informal than that, more upbeat than that, but it's worth making a record of what people have agreed to as this emergency plays out. You should also look in your contracts for something called a force majeure clause. These are contracts that under which you may have acquired rights from an author, or contracts where you've acquired services from a printer, or anybody you're doing business with. A force majeure clause, as a general rule, excuses performance of an obligation due to circumstances beyond the control of the contracting parties. The issue is coming up all over America. It's the single most pervasive legal issue that comes with the COVID virus emergency. Some contracting parties are being positive and constructive about those clauses, some are not. If you look in your contract and you don't have a force majeure clause, then unfortunately the public health emergency doesn't, as a legal matter, excuse performance of your obligation under a contract. But if you do have one, you're entitled to delay or suspend obligations that you may be otherwise contractually obliged to do. There is a positive value in partial performance of your obligations, even if you cannot fully perform your obligations. There are concepts in the law that are known as substantial performance, which may not be perfect performance, but it means you've done a good faith effort to meet your obligations. And then there's a concept called mitigation of damages, where you're permitted under the law to take steps to reduce the damages that you may be suffering or the person on the other side of the business deal may be suffering. An excellent example of mitigation and substantial performance would be a partial payment of royalties or other obligations, even if you are not able to make the full payment. Again, that phrase, it remains our intention to fully perform our obligations, is important. But that could be followed by the sentence that says, at the present time, we are paying half of the royalty or a quarter of the royalty, something like that. On a related issue, it's not strictly a legal issue. There are financial resources coming available, including resources that will be implemented by the bill now in Congress. SBA loans, bridge loans, the IRS has extended tax filing deadlines. There will be financial resources that are specifically directed to small businesses. And so many independent publishers will, by definition, be in the target category. Again, that's not a legal issue, but it is an important resource if you're having a cash flow problem. It's a way of addressing that cash flow problem. And the two concrete examples that I've already mentioned are you could postpone for, I believe it's a 90-day period, but we should both check your tax payment that was previously due on April 15th, and you may be able to get cash flow in the form of an SBA loan to pay bills as they come to, or partially pay bills as they come to. And there's a lot of talk that those SBA loans or emergency loans will be forgiven at some point. You can't count on that, of course, and we don't know if that will ever actually happen, but it may happen. Since it's an emergency loan, there may be some loan forgiveness as part of the government policy for dealing with this emergency in the future. Those are some key points, top-level points that I wanted to share with you, and if there are any questions that I can answer, I'll be happy to do that as well.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think I'll just point out that a couple of our members had chatted in that they were curious what were the financial opportunities might be for people that use freelancers, that there seemed to be a lot of help for people that had employees, help for companies with employees. But I think what you're referencing in these SBA loans is a good opportunity for companies that mostly use freelancers. All that information is in the COVID Resource Center on IBPA's website. We've listed the SBA loan. We've talked about the stimulus package that currently is going through Congress. It's all still very fast-moving target, so we'll get that updated as quick as possible. But if you're using a lot of freelancers, which many of our members do, looking at these small business loans that are good for companies, generally speaking, as opposed to just relief for companies with employees, that's a good idea. And I'll ask you one follow-up question, Jonathan, from Zach, and then we'll move the rest in a general Q&A, because it has to do with this force majeure issue, which you and I went around last week, or a couple of weeks with. It is a very important part of a contract, which I will admit I didn't take a close look at until recently. And he wants to know if the presence of just the presence of the virus in the world can qualify as force majeure for contracts, or if something else has to come into play, like the government shutting down the airports or the governor putting us in shelter-in-place mode, et cetera. Like, can I just call them and be like, there's a crisis, and then they'll let me out of my contract?
This is an excellent question, and Angela and I actually grappled with precisely that issue. A force majeure clause must be in the contract for you to be entitled to relief for circumstances of force majeure. And what it actually says is significant, but it's not an open and shut case. Force majeure conceptually just means a superior force, a force beyond the control of the parties. Now, contracts often use specific words and phrases: strikes, riots, martial law, interruption in transportation, resources. I have not yet seen a prescient force majeure clause that says pandemic, global pandemic. But I am absolutely confident that no court would look at a force majeure clause, which is built on the idea of circumstances beyond the control of the party, and say a global pandemic that has resulted in a lockdown order in countries all over the world and has resulted in the cancellation of airline flights, that somehow doesn't reach the threshold of force majeure. So I'm as an attorney, I'm less concerned about the actual words and phrases that appear in the force majeure clause than I am with the fact that there is a force majeure clause. But the final point I want to make is that after Angela and I resolved a problem that we were working on, we had I thought, a very strong force majeure clause, but it did not mention public health emergency. The very same day, I happened to be working on a contract, and I went to the force majeure clause in that contract, and I added public health emergency. That's how contracts grow and change. There's a specific event in the world, and then the lawyers put it into their contract. But I don't think you need it in the contract to avail yourself of force majeure.
Right. But now, going forward, as with all of your insurance policies, they will probably now exclude, which is the unfortunate side of things. But yes, now this will become a national concern in a lot of different ways. Frank just wants to know quickly if IBPA has a sample book publishing contract. And we absolutely do that. Jonathan Kirsch has put together and has marginalized. It's at least 30 pages with marginalia that will explain to you exactly what each section is about and how you can make that section work for you and your company. So it's part of your membership benefits. In your membership benefits handbook, you can download that sample contract. It's a wonderful piece of work. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you,
that.
Angela.
We'll come back through Q&A. Maggie Langrick is also a board member with IBPA. She's finishing her second year on the IBPA Board of Directors. She is with a company called LifeTree Media, the hybrid publishing company. She has worked with many, many authors. I know you have prepared marks, Maggie, that you're going to walk through for your 6 to 10 minutes, but I'm going to pull up also Victoria Sutherland from Forward had a question that you might talk to and others can bounce in, which is that in a roundtable she was in last week, she heard caution about delaying pub dates, that if everyone does this, we're going to have, I mean, it's just like shifting the problem to tomorrow, like borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. We'll have a huge plug in the market and discoverability will become a problem down the road. So like how far do you kick the can a little bit, kind of a conversation? And many of the participants also were saying, well, should I delay? Should I go? And very specifically saying, I have an April 21st launch date.
Yeah.
You know, so the specifics I know kind of hard to get into in this conversation, but let's, if you don't mind, go through what you do and then we might tack it on the end or see how it fits in.
Sure. Yeah, no, well, that's a great place to open up this little conversation about the publisher perspective. Of course, we're considering that too. You know, I can only speak to our experience as a publisher and that of, you know, some of my colleagues and counterparts and friends that I've spoken to. But we have been, you know, discussing all of that, and it's a moving target. You know, so we have our biggest ever spring season coming up, and we're concerned about the disruption to those book launches. Naturally, our philosophy as it's developing right now is to ask the question about suitability of the title type and also prominence of it. So yeah, it makes sense that, you know, if everybody is to delay their pub date to the fall, then we're going to have just really a huge glut of books. It's going to make discoverability difficult. It just, you know, creates a lot of operational challenges and all of that. So our philosophy is to look at the nature of the titles that are coming out and to ask whether, you know, whether this is the type of book content that is likely to cut through the noise. You know, there are some titles which are really needed right now, and it makes sense to get them out. In particular, we're thinking about, you know, we've heard about the trend toward children's books and cookbooks. We also think, I mean, I wish that I had a book coming out right now about, you know, creating a kitchen garden, because I can't buy fresh mint anymore. You know, so there are some topics that are going to be really timely right now. For those that you think are likely to get lost in the shuffle at the moment, it may make sense to delay, but I wouldn't do that across the board. That's our philosophy. But again, you know, this is an unprecedented situation. We haven't ever looked at an entire industry having to, you know, have its season challenged in this way. So yeah, so getting back to kind of like what I was prepared to talk about, you know, what we've been doing right now is really kind of communicating with our authors a lot. I held a little sort of a virtual town hall via Zoom last week to update our authors. They're all really clamoring for advice to know, you know, what should they be doing to market their books right now? What should they be doing to prepare, particularly those with not yet published titles or those whose titles just recently published. So that's something that I think that every publisher really should be doing, is, you know, to kind of push information out to authors as much as possible. Similarly, we're in close communication with our distributor. So we are distributed by PGW, Publishers Group West. And they're, of course, a division of Ingram now. So many of the pieces of advice that Bailey and Robin shared earlier, that's been filtering down to me too. And I won't kind of reiterate it too closely, but I will just say, you know, it's been very, very helpful to get time with our distributor to learn more about what's happening at the retail level and to get their advice on what they think that we can do to adjust and shift and mitigate the problem. So they're doing training sessions and webinars on things like, you know, metadata management and setting up Lightning Source for those publishers that haven't previously used it. So we're finding that really helpful. We're also getting, so we were relieved to learn that book distributors have been deemed an essential business, that the DCs are all open and that lightning source is happening. We've also learned, if I can just get into what I've learned about the, the kind of the retail landscape that perhaps Bailey and Robin didn't get into. So we know that airport stores are pretty much shut down, museums and specialty stores too. Barnes & Noble is trying to keep its doors open, its physical doors open, and making the argument that bookstores are an essential business. But we have to look at the, realistically, that's going to be a challenge because they're going to struggle to staff those locations. And of course, customers in many regions are under stay-at-home orders. So there's not, much that the bookstores can do, to kind of keep their brick and mortar business alive. So we are seeing a shift toward digital and e-commerce, digital formats, as everyone has touched upon, super important. We're also thinking about, which titles to kind of ramp up audiobook production for. We do know that people are wanting to read, they're wanting to read, they're stuck at home, but I think our focus right now is really thinking about, it's not just about availability and giving those readers access to our books. It's also about understanding that everyone's bandwidth is really stretched. People are distracted. And if you want to sell a book to them, you better be sure that that book is either delivering critical information or really compelling escapism. I think that's what readers need right now. We're all sort of, we've got so many hours in the day, and in order to be competitive, you need to really think about what is most useful for people. So we've also been advised that our international orders have basically been halted. PGW is still shipping books by sea over to the UK and Australia, but they have halted their air shipments. So that whole side of the business seems to be very much in wait and see mode. And of course, there hasn't been any news yet on Frankfurt Book Fair. That's a little ways down the road. We are, in light of we've all heard a lot about Amazon and how they have, they've announced that they've deprioritized shipment of basically all goods other than essential household stuff, medical equipment, and that. They are still fulfilling book orders, but there is a delay, and they sort of, I think they said that they expect that to lift in early April, but of course that may be extended. Our distributor has told us, though, that Amazon has been shifting more and more of its book orders away from their own fulfillment through their warehouse and through to CDX, Consumer Direct Fulfillment, which is something that Ingram offers. And it hasn't been touched upon, so I should mention it. That is the program by which Ingram fulfills orders that are placed through the e-commerce sites like Barnes & Noble's online, Target, Walmart, and bookshop.org too. What that means is that when consumers place orders on those e-commerce sites, instead of those retailers having to fulfill those orders directly, they are just directed toward the distribution center that Ingram has, and so they're sent out directly. So what we understand is that where there is a delay on some Amazon shipments, that may be mitigated by we're routing more orders to these other e-commerce retailers, and hoping that that is helpful. So and we've already talked about the Aerial platform too. So just getting back to what authors and publishers can do to sort of support sales. Again, really wanting to make sure that your metadata is robust. It's going to help to aid discovery and also ensure that your titles appear with the complete information in the way that you want them to wherever they're listed, because e-commerce is just going to be so critical over this next period. We're encouraging all of our authors very much to communicate a lot with their audience. Let them know that your book is still coming out if the pub date hasn't been pushed, and really double down on content marketing. This is a really good time to build, nurture, and strengthen your bond and your relationship with your audience, especially if there is some sort of topical relevance to your book content or your advice. Similarly, we're looking at our media outreach and refocusing, working really closely with our publicity teams to find angles that are relevant and likely to cut through the noise. A lot of people are focused, understandably, very much on the news right now, but your book can be newsworthy in this environment. If it has some underlying information or advice, maybe that's about, sort of mental health. Maybe it's about DIY and crafts and things that you can do with your kids at home. Maybe it's about, a career change or setting up as a solopreneur. If you have books along these angles, it's just a really good idea to call out the crisis even in your media pitches to make it really clear what the relevance is, so that you might be successful in winning some of that super scarce earned media. We're considering other, kind of creative ways to, to do promotions and giveaways, talking about free ebook downloads with the purchase of the print edition, especially if there's likely to be any kind of delay of delivery of the print edition. And again, under our distributors' advice, we are setting up our upcoming titles in Lightning Source now. That's the print-on-demand feature or program. So even if we have print-run distribution and books are in the warehouse, it's a good idea to get that title set up in Lightning Source in case you need to do that gap program that Bailey was talking about. And again, considering if not a push to the next season, thinking about perhaps like a relaunch. We have several authors who are right in the middle of their book launches right now. It's not even something that they're planning for in a few weeks' time, but they're just getting kind of sideswiped by this thing, and they're halfway through their big media outreach and all their promotional activities, and it's just falling on deaf ears right now. So we're talking about doing a kind of like a revival, a relaunch, and in some cases scaling back the planned media outreach or planned campaign scope, and putting some of that budget away for later to come back when people have sort of kind of found their feet and business comes back to normal, assuming that it does. So as a hybrid publisher, that's what kind of some things that we are doing and other publishers can do to mitigate the impact on book sales. But as a hybrid publisher, we're also concerned about potential loss of revenue from our service side of our business, right? Our authors engage us as our clients, and we have seen some project cancellations, people who are either delaying or putting off doing a book project with us because their speaking business has now gone sideways, and they're concerned about their own income. However, we've also seen actually something of an uptick in inquiries from people who are saying, what, I'm grounded, I'm stuck at home, my busy travel schedule is now suddenly super clear, and this is a good time to hunker down and write that book. So I think that any sort of, whether you're a hybrid or a traditional publisher, this is, potentially a very good time to set about work on new book projects, because we want to be thinking about what we're putting in the pipeline for next year. And we are really thinking hard and carefully about, trying to see around the corners and think about what kinds of things people are going to be interested in reading next year. So as I was saying earlier, just as we're kind of like competing and clamoring for attention and we want to be hyper relevant, we also want to be thinking about what are the knock-on effects of, society weathering this crisis all, together. So some of the topics that, our team is anticipating that, will be part of the ripple effect of not just what's happening now, but how it will shape us in terms of how we're thinking and feeling and living, and working a year from now, after we have gone through, potentially a prolonged period of quarantining with loved ones in close quarters or alone. So we're thinking again about, depression, anxiety, grief, and recovery from trauma. That is obviously going to be something that people are going to be coping with, especially if there are really, widespread casualties. So that's something we have to think about. We're thinking about multi-generational living as one of the trends, as we're seeing a lot of people have kind of like younger adults have rushed back to their family homes to kind of quarantine with their parents. And some of them will lose their jobs along the way and, may wind up staying at home longer than planned. We're living in close quarters. We're going to need books that help us to deal with family dynamics, relationships, parenting. All of those things are really going to be important. Similarly, I predict that there's going to be an increase in interest in living in an eco-friendly manner and not over-consuming resources. I know that I've never been so aware of how long a roll of paper towels will last, and thinking like, oh, I don't need to dry my hands on this paper towel. Let's think about, or even wipe down my groceries with a paper towel. Let's think about reusable cloths and that kind of thing. So growing kitchen gardens, DIY. I think that there's going to be an increased interest in those topics a year from now, and so this is a good time to start, developing those books. We're also considering doing some quick turnaround ebook releases that really speak to more urgent needs, and it just remains to be seen how we kind of like navigate that in terms of like unhooking ourselves from the seasonal publication, from the traditional publication seasons, right? And so what does it look like to put out an ebook in the middle of summer, where we normally would just be publishing in sort of fall, winter, and then spring? But I think that just as this crisis is going to affect everyone's life and business, and there are undoubtedly going to have, negative effects widespread, it's also an opportunity for us to really act proactively, plan for the future, stay positive, communicate that to the world at large. I think that what I think Robin was saying at the very beginning, we as book publishers play an incredibly important role in society in terms of helping authors to share what they know that can help to bring the world into a better place.
Great. Thank you, Maggie. Lots of talk there about trends that you're seeing and trends that you think you might see. And there was a lot of chat, too, from the members about specific books, like, does this book make sense now? Should I do this now? And what I'd like to encourage is that if folks have questions like that, if you have a book you're considering delaying or you want to know if you should keep it going, put it in the chat. We're not using the Q&A, just a reminder. We're not monitoring the Q&A, just the chat box. Send it out to the crowd here. We've got 100 people on the line, and let's see what people think, if they think you should delay it or move it. But, one of the things that it does seem to me to be true that we can't all delay. There's certainly going to be books that are going to be necessary now, and that level goes all the way from, yes, activity books, but also fiction, sure, that we're sure like every topic is going to be important to get out into the market. New books are going to be more important than ever for folks. I think this is kind of it was a little bit of a funny question, because I remember the coloring book palooza of 5 years ago. I remember when that was it, man. We were all going to publish coloring books and make $1 million. Is that going to come back? Any prediction on that one, Maggie?
I think so. And judging from my social media feed, I know that there are a lot of people just in my personal kind of network of friends who are posting pictures of their doodles and their coloring books and things. But I think that extends to all kinds of arts and crafts. I know that even my daughter is 23 years old and generally glued to her computer. She tells me that she's been drawing, painting, doing yoga. In our house, we are looking at, setting up a corner for, sort of to do some arts and crafts activities. And I think that people are interested in providing for themselves, both in terms of their creative outlets and also our material needs. So I really do think that DIY and arts and crafts are going to be a really growing category, along with cookbooks. Do you know that there's a flour and yeast shortage in America right now because everybody's baking bread?
Wow, I thought that was just me. Okay, good. Good to know I'm on trend. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to, there's a question that Zach had about book clubs. Zach, I just want to know that I saw that. I think it's a good one. So we're going to pull that into the Q&A for everyone to address. And then folks have questions about the GAP program at Ingram and just generally how quick can we get POD up and running. So during general Q&A, I want to talk more about if you decide you want to just go quick or move in a different direction or get on more verticals, what's the timeline look like for things like that? But let's hear from our final panelist first, Kelly Peterson, who is the Director of Digital Strategy at Independent Publishers Group, which most of you know is one of the last standing independent book distributors in our country, based in Chicago. But Kelly's sitting in San Francisco right now. Kelly, you are, I think, finishing your second year on the IBPA Board of Directors. You've been with us a while. And you're going to talk a little bit from the digital side of things. We did have some questions about Amazon and digital and that kind of, and you that is your wheelhouse. So we're going to turn it over to you.
I spend most of my time thinking about Amazon. And one of the things that I
originally thought when everybody was starting to sequester at home was that we were actually going to be in a better position than we ever have been as publishers to survive this crisis. Because in the past, book distribution was all, boxes on trucks to bookstores. And now that more than 50% of the revenue that we earn is coming from online sales, from Amazon in particular, and it's even more when you add in the other retailers. We're probably at about 62% or so of our sales coming from online. I thought, oh, well, this is actually going to be only a small dip. And then Amazon announced that they were cutting orders or ceasing orders altogether, depending on what publisher it was. And I realized that now we don't have just a COVID crisis, we have an Amazon crisis, because Amazon is such a big percentage of all of our business in all different ways that having Amazon take a stand where they're not ordering books suddenly became monumental for our clients, and it could have even more effect than us being locked in our houses, right? And when that happened, we started looking at other places that we make money, and one of those is, digital audiobooks and ebooks. Now, the ebook trend, a lot of people think is flat. People who read PW might be thinking it's decreasing because at the Big Five it's decreasing, and they're reporting all of their sales information in. Personally, I think it's actually increasing because so many people are going indie and taking backlist indie, and Amazon doesn't report those sales, that I think it becomes, it kind of is a prophecy that they're happy to feed into by not releasing how much money they're making through KU and KDP. And so we really looked at what can we do to make this work. So for our publishers, we immediately put our direct from the warehouse ordering at a 30% discount. Two of our bigger publishers, Chicago Review Press and Triumph, which are in-house publishers, did their discounts at 35%. So we have that little bit going out from print, and that business is getting bigger every day. We always are stocking Ingram, and Ingram has been a bellwether for us, just kind of a gate against the storm for all of these online orders as well. And we are starting to see some Amazon orders trickle through at a fraction of what they normally do, and it seems to be focusing on their top 50 titles. We've got quite a few kids' books, so those are all starting to trend really well, and we're getting orders on those. But we really focused a lot of attention very early on ebook sales because we thought, libraries are closed, but online libraries are still open, and your library is functioning. Your library card is working at overdrive, and Hoopla has been huge for us these last few weeks. And as people discover these online sources and become online readers, because they just want to read books, it's going to create a whole new opportunity for publishers to leverage their books. So we gave our publishers an opportunity to tell us which titles or the full catalog that they wanted to give at 30% off. And we are doing, we sent 34,000 titles to our library services and said, you can have these books at 30% off. We went to retailers with a list of 2,000 books and said, these books can be between 99 cents and $2.99. And we let publishers pick their own pricing. So having opportunities like this and really maximizing both the value to the recipients, whether it's the library buying the book or it's the customer buying the book, has created a huge lift for us in our digital sales to help offset the decrease that we're seeing in our regular Amazon ordering. It's not everything, but what I would encourage you to do is, as you're looking to market your books, a couple of different things. There are all sorts of, there was an article in PW recently about a new organization that's helping for people who had canceled book tours called the Mighty Blaze, right? It is a organization of authors that are trying to amplify each other, and those things are really, can be really impactful right now, but you don't even have to reinvent the wheel like a Mighty Blaze did. Ebook first, publishers have been doing this for a long time. They are all kinds of blog tours and virtual book tours that are already set up
for genre fiction and primarily. Mommy bloggers are great sources for things like cookbooks and kids' activity books. So you have a lot of ways to get the word out about your books, and you have, with a digital copy, an opportunity to do fun giveaways and things like that. So I would highly encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities that are already there. Visit authors' use groups. They can give you all sorts of advice. IngramSpark authors are great at this, as Robin was talking about. Sharing the knowledge that they have can be key on how to get the word out about their books. And we've talked a lot about delaying books, but let me tell you, we're actually talking to people a lot about doing non-simultaneous release. So releasing the ebook and the digital audiobook now and the print book later, so that people who have been waiting for the book can still get the book and have the opportunity to have it in the interim. And you can do things like Amazon has what they call matchbooks, so you can buy the print book and get the ebook for a set price. So we're doing more and more of that with our publishers. That allows them to get the ebook now for, let's say, 99 cents because they've got the print book on order down the road. So I think that it's not all doom and gloom. I think that we have a lot of chances to reach our clients and send people to new places. I think that if there's one thing that this Amazon crisis to me has shown, it's that we need to make sure that our authors and our publishers, in my case, are linking to other places, that they're linking to IndieBound, that they're linking to bookshop.org, that they are giving people opportunities to buy somewhere else other than Amazon, because the more they do that, the more it'll shore them up for a crisis down the line. And I think that diversity has always been key in our industry. Having lots of bookstores has given us the opportunity to be successful publishers, and we shouldn't just fall into Amazon's well because it's easy, because something can go wrong and it can cause a big problem. I'd also encourage you to look at, if you can drag any pennies out of your pocket, and I know we're all financially in trouble, to look at the book industry BINC, which is support for booksellers and bookstores during this crisis period. They offer grants, not loans, to people who are in crisis to help them keep their electrical on, to help pay rent in some cases, to help them survive. And in the past, it's all been based on floods and things like that. But you can support BINC now and know that your money is going to go to booksellers that need it because they're out of a job because their stores are closed. I think that that's the one thing we can really do to shore up our publishing pipeline long term, because all these bookstores are faced with the idea of, are we closing for now or closing for good? And if we can make it easier for them, we should.
Great. That's fantastic. I wanted to mention that the link to that organization is in our COVID-19 Resource Center. So you can, yes, absolutely, go there and donate. We also put a link there to help the PALS employees that got laid off directly. They won't be helped by what's going on at BINC, because BINC is going to go to the bookstore owners themselves, very appropriately and very well done. But if you also want to support the employees that got laid off from PALS in Seattle, there's a link there that will show you how you can do that too. So that's great. I like that. And you made another interesting point, that is a shift. You've all talked about shifts that we might be making, and we'll come out of this with maybe new ways of doing business, and that's in windowing or not windowing. So we used to say, get all your formats out together. Yeah. And now you're saying, I mean, think about what can come out as an ebook, what can be digital now, and get your print book out when your print book's out. But let's get the content that's needed in the format that's usable today. That's, we can do that. We have the technology to do that. So an ebook first philosophy is not a terrible thing to play around with at this point in time. And Maggie, you had mentioned that in our practice or test run or whatever we called our rehearsal earlier as well. Mm-hmm. You were thinking about doing that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it's normally a best practice. I do think it makes sense that all formats come out at once, but this is not a normal time. And I think we can always take a minute to look at everything that we do as we do it throughout the day and see if it's the right thing to do right now. We can make changes that are temporary changes. I was just talking to somebody this morning about how the Orthodox rabbis are saying that for the first time, you can do Zoom for your Passover Seder. so that your grandparents can be part of it. And it's only for now. It's only because it's a pandemic. This is not approved long term. But it just goes to show that we can be flexible when we need to be flexible, and this is one of those opportunities. And our warehouse is doing the same thing Ingram's is. We do think books are a necessary service. We need escape right now. In World War II, Fred Astaire movies were the most popular movies out there because they were glitz and glamour and everything that people didn't have at that time. Books do the same exact thing for people. They allow you to escape to a time where you're not worried about, somebody coughing on you. And I think that as a result, our warehouses are open, but we're doing a lot of things to make sure our staff is safe at the warehouse. We have 2 shifts now that are completely separate. There's a cleaning that's done in between. People are spaced 10 feet apart. We're doing all we can to support the people that work for us as well.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Since you are unmuted and fully versed here, I want to ask Nicholas this question. Since you also work a lot with Amazon, how delayed is the reporting of Amazon digital sales? So, if we're talking about going digital through Amazon, how delayed is it? In other words, if they sold a lot of our digital books in March, when do we know this? When will we have the revenue from that?
Well, part of that is the way that your distributor relationship is set up. If you're doing it directly, if you're doing your own Amazon, usually you can see your daily sales. They do that for KDP authors, and then they pay you at the middle of the month following the sale. So you've got about a 15-day window, but that's only for indie authors. Everybody else has a delay built in, so we get paid. We get our statement about 15 days after the end of the month. We pay on that before we get the money from Amazon at IPG, which I think is just something that the Matthews brothers, that Joe and Clark have thought is just the right thing to do for our publishers. But in general, I would say you can expect a 45-day wait for your payment of sales as a whole at distributors all over.
Yeah, there is a delay. We're still in that world for sure.
Yeah, and they don't report well daily
No.
sales. Daily trend sales are not always accurate, and they often come 2 or 3 days later than we would expect to see them. So
We see the same thing.
Even though they say it's that day's sales, I really just don't believe it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you guys. We knew we would take an hour and a half. We still have 20 minutes. I'm going to start to just moderate through some of the questions that are coming in here. I wanted to point out just a kudos up from Lee to Jonathan that the legal stuff was really interesting and important to listen to and hear. And I agree. I often forget that. And then it comes in and I'm like, oh, that's very important. Okay. That's actually going to affect my business. So that's good to know. So thank you for that. Let me turn to the first question, or one of the 2 questions I said we would bring up first, which is just quickly from the Ingram side. You talked about GAP program. How quickly can you go from putting your book into the Lightning Source platform or the IngramSpark platform, and then it's available through iPage, it's on the catalog, it's ready to be ordered by the trade community?
So let me go first, and then you can talk about GAP, Bailey. So on IngramSpark, for all of you who may not know, it's free to set up an IngramSpark account. You can upload your content if you already have your files ready to go, and you can upload within hours, minutes even. And then usually that it takes a day or 2 for your content to get processed through our system. And then once it's live in our system, it goes out into the Ingram catalog like that night. And then Ingram then distributes it out to other online retailers. So it's pretty quick as far as IngramSpark goes.
Okay.
Yeah. And in terms of GAP, Angela, so GAP is a program offered to publishers who are already traditionally stocked at Ingram Book Company. And what it allows them to do is, for a very off-the-cuff example, if Ingram has an inventory of 5 copies of your book, but an order of 8 comes in, that would allow us to digitally print at Lightning Source the 3 that we're lacking. We would consolidate and then ship all 8 of those together to the retailer who purchased that book. So it's designed for those who are traditionally inventoried. Typically, From start to finish, setting up a title in Gap. You would establish a Lightning Source account, and then you would set the title up. We have a couple, 2 to 3 days of file processing time. And then once you approve it for production, we would only order that digital printing when there was not inventory on hand. So as soon as we receive more inventory on hand, we actually we use the inventory that you send us to Ingram. So we only utilize that digital printing when we don't have enough inventory on hand. One thing in terms of Gap, we are seeing a lot of our publishers who are traditionally stocked at IBC bring a lot of titles to Gap right now. One thing we are also encouraging, not just our Gap publishers to do, but all of our publishers to do, is to go ahead and price those internationally as well. With a lot of travel restrictions, a lot of even those who aren't doing traditional inventory are having trouble shipping books internationally, and so pricing internationally is very important right now, especially whenever you're printing digitally. So between setting up your title for Gap, you're able to add international pricing at the same time as well. So we're definitely encouraging both. But yeah, in terms of setting that up, if you don't already have a Lightning Source account, that's step one, and then uploading the files and a few days of processing time there.
And if you are already an IPG publisher, you still have the option to go to Lightning Source and to Amazon to print your book directly. We do that for hundreds of books. Yes, probably thousands of books.
Hey, Angela, I just want to jump back in here just to mention a couple of new things that we've just added to IngramSpark. In fact, we just launched an upgrade to our site yesterday. So there's some beta functionality that if you haven't been on the site recently, you should kind of take a look. But one of the things that we recently launched is offering free ISBNs for the U.S. customers. So this isn't anything that I ever encourage, but if you have a cash flow situation, you would be able to use our free ISBN to maybe put out an ebook or a print version and test it out. So, also in this new beta version that we just launched yesterday is a new formatting tool that we've been working on for years that will let you create your book within IngramSpark fully formatted files. So especially on the ebook side, you could use that tool for that, and that's free as well.
Okay. So yeah, it's a good idea to check what your service providers can do and are doing. I see people ramping up on things super quick, right? Like we all are. I never thought we could do work from home, entire staff, and now I'm wondering why we haven't done that. So things are really ramping up quickly on a lot of programs that were in the works will probably be launched. So check those out. Kelly, for IPG, I know, and that for your distributor, you also do printing. You move that into your functionality. How long does it take to establish a print-on-demand option for an existing title that's with IPG?
It doesn't take long at all. So your publisher development person will flip. You just have to contact them. They flip the title and you send the files. And as soon as you do that, within the day, it can be set up. I wouldn't say that it is going to be the same day, because often the back and forth of sending the files and the emails can take a week, but it doesn't take forever. It's a pretty quick process. And we do have a lot of options. So we do do digital printing only, which is the LSI model for Ingram, as well as the Gap model. We have multiple kinds, the same sort of thing for Amazon, where they can print directly, and you use your inventory for everything else. There's a lot of options, and that's part of the reason that you should go to your publisher developer contact.
Got it. And Natalie says she just did a POD order with IPG, and it was done in days.
Excellent.
Great. Any thoughts for our children's book publishers out there? We talked a lot about digital and bringing the format of, the format of the home for those who can't leave their home. But we know a lot of children's books, really, they're difficult in digital if they're fixed format. If you have a children's book publisher, what advice might we give them? And even Maggie, we can throw to you too. If you have a bunch of children's books, are you thinking about these formats differently? What does anybody think about that?
I would start out, just because digital is my space, and say that digital children's books are more expensive. If you have an audio file for that children's book, that's definitely the first one you're going to want to do. Read-along children's books do very well at non-Amazon sources. So they're great at Barnes & Noble, they're great at Apple, they're great at Kobo, and they're great ways for kids to learn how to read because the word will light up as it's said. So it really helps kids understand sounds and words together. And in general, that's where I would guide you. Those are usually your best-selling books, but I would always say usually you start with your top tier with anything that you do.
Okay. Great. And do you have any, how are you working through children's picture books if you publish many, Maggie?
Oh, we don't do any children's books at all, and almost all of our books are text-driven. But just a note about format when it comes to, like, again, back to the GAP program or using Lightning Source, a lot of our paperback books we choose to print with flaps, and of course you can't do that with print on demand. So we are thinking about whether it makes sense to change that practice or to put out a non-flap, to redesign the cover. Similarly, actually, and this is actually more of a question for our, Ingram and IPG people, but we're wondering about the books that we have coming out in a hardcover. Hardcover print on demand is obviously, far more, expensive to do than paperback, and we're wondering about the sort of, strategically whether it makes sense to simultaneously publish in paperback for those books so that they can be fulfilled relatively easily through print on demand. It's actually just a question for rather than
our hardcover capability is still running like it always has, but it is more labor intensive, so that's something to think about, right? So if we don't know what the future is going to be, in the next month or so. But that's something to think about. I think it's in what we're seeing are, especially on the children's book side, more people buying the hardcover and also the hardcover with the jacket on it. So you can't have a jacket with a flap on a hardcover. Mm-hmm. And especially for libraries, that's what they prefer to buy. So we now do have that option. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Yeah, but you don't do paperback with flaps.
We don't do paperback.
Yeah. So yeah. We're having to rethink a little bit.
And I would say the same thing, that hardcovers take longer to print. There are things in that you can tell it's a POD book. Sometimes the embossing isn't as nice on the spine, for example, when you take the jacket off. But we do quite a bit of those hardcovers for libraries and paperbacks for everybody else. And that seems to be a really good strategy. You can do hardcovers for everybody, but they tend to go out of stock while you have waiting for printing for reorder.
Yes, please ask each other questions. It's my favorite. The brain trust that we have is like the best part of my job, to listen to you guys talk with each other. Have any of you heard of this company called findawayvoices.com?
Yes, for audio. Mm-hmm.
So, Annette is asking about, she says that, this might just be very interested in how you guys initially react, but Audible is taking 6 weeks to load an audiobook via that platform, findawayvoices.com. Is that just a function of everything? By the way, it took me 7 hours to get WebEx to allow me to get more than 100 of you on this call yesterday. So, wow, there are long wait times, long queues, long digital queues.
Everybody's adjusting to move in their workforce home. That could be some of this. But we're still, on the Ingram side, we're still the regular turnaround times that we've had. That could change in the coming weeks, but for now, we're where we've always been. Findaway is definitely an audio service that I know and could recommend. I know that Smashwords works directly with Findaway, so that might be something that, and maybe Kelly does too. Currently at Ingram, at least with IngramSpark, we're not offering audio service, but that is something that we're working on internally.
Yeah, so we deliver audiobooks to Find Away Voices just like we deliver them to Audible and to Kobo and Overdrive and all of the vendors that are doing audio. Find Away Voices is a little different in that they're providing the narrator and they are a little more like, yeah, they're a little more like the recording as well. We have had great success with some of the publishers who've used them for recording. And they are Apple's preferred vendor. So the Apple content is coming largely from Find a Way now versus Audible, although they use Audible to fill in the gaps. Apple is great for marketing, which is I work with them directly. I work with the retailers directly to market all our clients' ebooks and audiobooks, and I would say that they love working with Find a Way, and if you can go there, I recommend it.
So what do you think of this 6-week delay is about? Do you think this is just the queue issue that we have now with everyone is flooding the systems?
Yeah, I think part of it's that, and part of it's that they're trying to double down on their quality control at Audible. They've had some complaints about the quality level. It's the same reason I think they opened up KU for publishers, because they had a lot of complaints about the quality of the KU books when it was all just indie authors. So I think part of it's that.
Okay, good. And Dave says Draft to Digital works with Find a Way as well. Dave,
yes, they
our
do.
SND side of things. And Victoria says stuff is getting done in remote work environments, and I want to just applaud that. Again, the things I didn't think we could do that we actually can do. I guess it points to my myopic vision. Sometimes I think we've done it this way forever. Let's keep that going. But yeah, particularly this, for example, it's been really, really helpful for me to hear you guys all together. Like a board meeting. It's like an open board meeting that we're having right here. If there's any other questions, I'm going to start to say some things that will wind us down. The first thing I will say is I'm going to share the contact information on the screen again. So everyone who is doing your email, jump back quickly, or not so quickly. Take a screen grab of this. I know I will find it in the numerous files I have on my desktop. Somebody fill the void. Oh, got it. Here it is, coming at you. So here will come up the contact info. Everyone has agreed to supply their email address so you can get a hold of them if you'd like to get a hold of them. And the final thing we typically do, I learned this from IBPA's marketing director, Lee Wind, who runs our webinar program. That's probably a good thing to mention. Our webinar program has not stopped and does continue twice a month, every Wednesday, not every Wednesday, I guess it would be every other Wednesday. We have a general webinar program that will continue. And again, don't forget, this session will happen every Thursday at 10 a.m. You can come in. These will always be free. And I will always try to find some smart talking heads to ground us so that we're not just looking at each other wondering what's going on today. But that's also helpful. I will sit in these calls with you and wonder what's going on today for at least an hour every Thursday at 10. So this is what I learned from Lee Wind. Let us know what you learned today. We love to hear through the chats. What was one thing, two things, something that you picked up today that was interesting to you or sparked for you that you're going to think about more or do something with? I'd like to get a few pieces of that and then throw to the panel while that's filling up, I hope, in the chat. What did you learn today? How about you guys? Any final thoughts or words of wisdom?
Well, I was going to say, I always learn something whenever I have any conversation with Jonathan, and so I really appreciate your spending time with us today. And also, I'm not sure you revealed that you're actually a published author yourself, so just to give you some more street cred there.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be part of this wonderful group.
Agreed. I agree. And Angela, I just want to thank you for coordinating this. I learned something at both sessions. And I wrote down about bookshop.org, which we're going to through Ingram, I think, as being such a good opportunity. So I'll make sure that I'm mentioning that.
Great. Yeah, bookshop.org, man, it's coming up on everybody's radar and should, I think rightly so.
It is. No, this was great. Angela, thank you so much. I actually wound up taking a lot of notes myself, just hearing from everyone. I think that this is such a great gathering of minds, and you did such a wonderful job. And thank you to the other panelists, too. I took notes from everyone, which is always fun.
Yeah, we all learn every day, too, as well.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank, Bailey, Kelly, and Robin. Jonathan, obviously, your advice is always so much appreciated. But it was also really great to hear what's happening at the distributor level and what folks are doing behind the scenes to help us get our books out to readers. So I really appreciated your insights and your information.
Thank you.
We did record today's session to answer some of the questions, so we are going to package this and send it to everyone. We'll also put it on our YouTube channel. I think the content here is great, generally speaking, but of course this is a rapidly changing environment, so what we talk about next Thursday could be completely different or focused in a different way from what we talked about today. So please do come back and join us, and we'll continue to keep the conversation open. Thank you for sharing what you've learned. Everyone saw that. Oh, we didn't talk much about book clubs. Let's just make that our topic next week. I don't know, we're on the fly. So next week, we're going to open up with book clubs, remote marketing. What do we do now that we can't meet face-to-face? How are we helping our authors adjust to that, or how are we as author publishers adjusting to that? We'll just talk straight through that next time. All right. Thank you, guys. That's it from us.
All right.
Very good.
Bye.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye,
Have a
guys.
good day, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining.
You well. Take care.
Stay safe.